Hey, welcome back to the Backyard Professor videos. I'm Kerry Shurst, the Backyard Professor. I'm just, let me get over here to, let me zoom that camera out just a little bit. Just for kicks and giggles. Zoom it out, stupid, not in. There we go. Oh. Hey, I'll mellow out with, gosh, guess I better scoot the, try to get comfortable in my trailer, man. It's close to impossible. I'll mellow out a little bit on Twit and Green Messiah and his father. Green Messiah is now talking real decent on the YouTube site, and I'll tell you what, he's asking a couple of good questions. He's made some further points that I want to elaborate on because I think he's misunderstanding how the Book of Mormon is portraying the events, and so I want to clarify that. Now, interestingly enough, I showed you Dennis Potter, who has traveled over there in Arabia and actually been on that ancient frankincense trail that the Bedouin for millennia have traveled, and so on and so forth. I also have another source. Actually, I have more than just this and Dennis Potter's. There is more. That's what a historian does, is they look into the sources. We're going to read from the Book of Mormon record, and we're going to explore another source. This is by Lynn M. Hilton and Hope A. Hilton. This particular text is called Discovering Lehi, New Evidence of Lehi and Nephi in Arabia. Not very old. These people have also traveled to Arabia. This is 1996. And they have discussed finding that the actual geography that we find in the Book of Mormon does match what we have in Arabia. And they, I've got some pages turned down so that I can reference to them. But let me show you this. Here we go, amateur hour again. It's fun being an amateur. You don't have to worry about impressing anybody, you know what I mean? A pro has to be very careful and make things look all hunky-dory and all that. An amateur, hey, we can get away with murder. Here's Jerusalem right here. Isn't that a beautiful fingernail? Boy, that's about the ugliest thing. I've been doing woodworking. Been doing some stain. So anyway, whoops. Here's Jerusalem. They traveled down to the borders of the Red Sea. This is Aqaba. This is the borders of the Red Sea. This is where they traveled. The Book of Mormon does not say they traveled for 3 days from here to the Valley of Lemuel. They traveled to the borders of the Red Sea, which is Aqaba, and from Aqaba traveled for 3 days, approximately a 60 to 75 mile trip. And here is an actual geographical situation that scholars are saying now can be identified based on the description in the Book of Mormon. They're arguing this is a pretty plausible situation for the Valley of Lemuel. So the idea here is that the Wadi al-Araba to the Red Sea at Al-Aqaba, then along the eastern Red Sea coast to the town of Nahum is the depiction in the Book of Mormon. They're on page 5 there. That's not what I wanted to read to you, though. What I want to get to is, okay, 31, page 31. He says, if we review the record from the beginning in the Book of Mormon, we can first assume that the group didn't dawdle getting out of Jerusalem because Lehi's life was threatened, so they hightailed it and boogied. And that they probably could have traveled at least as fast as Nelson Gluck, who had a National Geographic article in 1944 discussing his travels down this same frankincense trail in Arabia. And on camel, he averaged about 13 miles a day. That means 8 to 12 days between Jerusalem and Aqaba at the head of the Red Sea. So we're talking a little bit more than a week, maybe 2 weeks. This, I suspect, is where you're getting confused, Green Messiah. The Book of Mormon does say, "Behold, came past, the Lord spake unto my father, even in a dream. He said, Blessed are you, da, 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 da. You got to get the heck out of town, dude." So he departed, and it came to pass. This is 1 Nephi chapter 2, verse 4. And he says, "And it came to pass that he departed into the wilderness. He left his house, land of inheritance, and his gold, and his silver, and his precious things, and took nothing with him, save it were his family, and provision, and tents, and departed into the wilderness." The reason I'm emphasizing that is because that's a beautiful Hebraism. I mean, that's perfect Hebrew structure, man. That's fabulous. You don't find anything like that in either of the Hebrews, folks. Sorry, you just don't. "And he came down by the borders near the shore of the Red Sea." So now they're at the Red Sea. From that point, he traveled in the wilderness in the borders which are nearer the Red Sea. Now that sounds kind of odd. The Hiltons have found an actual geographic situation that matched this on the Frankincense Trail, and I'm going to read that to you. Another really nifty little touch that to us hasn't made any sense at all, but if you actually go to the location, which the Hiltons have done, which Potter has done and all that, they show the geography of that. Very interesting. "And he did travel in the wilderness with his family," and he describes his family. Verse 6, "And it came to pass that when he traveled 3 days in the wilderness." Now this is from the time that he was already at the Red Sea, not from Jerusalem. He had been traveling almost 2 weeks already. Then Nephi begins to count the days. So that's how you're misunderstanding this, Green Messiah. That's where your confusion's coming from. You're misinterpreting the book. "And it came to pass that when he had traveled 3 days in the wilderness, he pitched his tent in a valley by the side of a river of water. And he built an altar of stones." Notice it's not stone altar, it's an altar of stones. Good Hebrew usage. "And made an offering unto the Lord," and all that. "And then he called the name of the river Laman, and it emptied into the Red Sea, and the valley was in the borders near the mouth thereof," so on and so forth. So this understanding is, we don't know what length of time it took from Jerusalem to the Red Sea. All we know is they say first, we went down to the Red Sea. From the Red Sea and Aqaba, there is a settlement there. So they're not in the wilderness yet. Even though they're in the desert, that's true. But from that point on down, then they travel into the wilderness for 3 days. I hope that clarifies that up for you. It clarified it up for me. Thanks for bringing it up, because it helps me read the Book of Mormon closer and more carefully, and it makes even more sense now.